What is 40k? What is 40k? What is 40k? 40k is the lore, I guess. I mean, it's probably different to everybody. Everybody likes different aspects of it, but I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that 40k is the lore. I mean, at the end of the day, how many of us got into it because we liked the lore? Tabletop toys, I have those. It's video games, I have those. It's books, I have and listen to those. So it's lots of things. But at the end of the day, those three things are connected together by the idea that 40k is lore. It isn't any one book that makes me go, oh, I love 40k. It's all the books working together at the same time. I just recently listened to 3 different books: Fall of Cadia, Daemon Breaker, and The Devastation of Baal. All 3 books take place dealing with their own stuff. The Fall of Cadia is all about Cadia. Daemon Breaker is about Ophelia Seven, and Devastation of Baal is obviously about Baal. And all 3 books talk about when Cadia cracks. All 3 books have an event. They're written by different authors, but they all share an event that occurs at the same time, and all 3 books do a really good job of describing this event. Obviously, the Fall of Cadia is about the event itself and is working its way up that way towards the event the entire time, and I'll talk more about that later. But Devastation of Baal and Daemon Breaker, while they talk about Cadia and that it's happening, it's so far away that oftentimes the characters are like, it's not our problem. So when Cadia does crack and it becomes immediately their problem and all the consequences of Cadia cracking happens, that's why I love 40k. So to understand 40k, you have to understand the lore. So let me just give you a quick recap on what's going on in the 40k lore. Nothing sells without the lore. 40k is nothing without its stories and its people and its creatures and its history. 40k is an amalgamation of all this stuff. That's why it's so hard to talk about. I can't just tell you about my favorite trader Primarch because you don't know what a trader Primarch is. That is foreign language. So I'm going to try and share with you some of the story and some of the verbiage that's so important to understanding 40k.
40k lore is just alternate history. It starts a long time ago, but we don't need all the weird alien stuff that happens before humans take on the scene. We'll skip that. Let's start with just normal humans. That's Earth, okay? Humans, using the power of ChatGPT, are able to colonize vast swaths of the Milky Way galaxy. And then ChatGPT does what ChatGPT does best. It turns evil and starts killing everyone. This brought on a dark age of technology and destroyed a once vast human empire, leaving Earth in shambles, roaming with cyborg barbarians and other man-made horrors, until our buddy Big E, the about-to-be God Emperor of mankind, decided to finally step in and fix stuff up. Things were bad, so he created an army of super soldiers to reconquer Earth, and then decided that this first draft of super soldiers needed a second draft. So then we get Space Marines. They're the poster boys of the game. They are super soldiers that wear big power armor and shoot bigger guns. With the creation of this new type of super soldier, Big E needed to vary their specializations. Some are good at sieges, some are good at space battles. You get the idea. Quote from the Death Guard Codex. When the Emperor first set out to conquer the galaxy of mankind, he fashioned the warlords known as the Primarchs to serve as his greatest generals. Yet, catastrophe befell these mighty beings, scattering their own forms across the stars.
So we've heard a lot about 40k, and we know a lot about what's going on up to that point. But now we're going to talk a little bit about 30k, or the Horus Heresy. One of the traitors would be Mortarion. One of these Primarchs, and I've talked about Primarchs a little bit before, would be Mortarion, 14th Legion of the Death Guard, originally the Dusk Raiders, but that doesn't matter. I'm not going to go too deep into the lore, but this legion is important because they're one of the few legions that turns traitor and goes against Big E, the God Emperor of mankind. They fight a horrible battle on Istvan V called the Drop Site Massacre. Now, a couple of these legions would turn corrupt with the power of different chaos gods from a place called the Warp, and we'll talk about the Warp in a little bit. But the important part is that these chaos gods corrupt and change the men and women underneath them. In Mortarian's case, our men and women became horribly disease-ridden and bloated with tentacles and pustules, but they find this to be an ecstasy under their chaos god Nurgle, the great-grandfather. But this must all be very confusing for you, because we're not even talking about techno-barbarians anymore. And what is a legion? And what is a Primarch? What's going on?
Yeah, so instead of going back into detail about that stuff, we're just gonna move on. So in Warhammer, there's an alternate realm called the Immaterium, or Warp. It's a reflection of the galaxy at hand, and the galaxy at hand is a horrible place to live. So the Warp is filled with horrible beings. There are 4 main gods of the Warp, who all vie for power over both themselves and the mortal creatures of the universe. So as you can see, it's a huge setting, and I haven't even made it to the 40k part of the story, where all the real meat is. First, I have to give you a 30k update. That's right. If you thought 40k was a mess, try checking out 30k. Editor's note here. 30k is just for the timeline understanding. It is normally referred to as the Horus Heresy. End of editor's note. This is the part of the story after Big E has found all his sons, and you see one son, Horus, needed more power than the rest and got corrupted, and there are 30 books on just this whole event alone. Okay, so basically Horus gets a bunch of the other sons together and says, I got all this sick power for me and my armies. You guys can make deals with different or the same gods and we can all be super powerful evil guys. And some of the sons were like, heck yeah, that's awesome. So the first thing they did was ambush a bunch of loyalists, Space Marines, and something called the Drop Site Massacre. I talked a little bit about this, and we'll talk a little bit about this again one day. This pissed everyone off, and Horus went on his merry way to Terra, where he died fighting his dad, but not before crippling his father and turning him into a vegetable. This is where I remind you that Big E is shorthand for God Emperor of Mankind. This is the event that turns him into a God Emperor. He's no longer just the emperor of mankind. He is a literal god to some people. Because he's worshipped as a living god on his throne in Holy Terra, where they sacrifice thousands of psychers every day to keep his soul alive. And this brings us to the 40th millennium. But unfortunately, there are even more events that take place now. We're not even in the 40th millennium. We're in the 41st millennium. That's how long this has been going on. And it's filled with danger. Marauding Xenos, from Drukhari and Eldari, which are space elves, to orcs, Tyranids, and the Tau. The universe has no end of threats, but on top of all of this are the nefarious agents of the arch enemy, Chaos, those warp gods who constantly strive to undermine the fastenings of an empire held together on bureaucracy and faith. And those guys from 30k, the evil sons of the Emperor, yeah, some of them are still around, and even more of their Space Marines are still around fighting battles and whatnot. Cadia stands. The planet broke before the guard did. Famous quotes from those faithful to the Emperor of humanity. After the Horus Heresy, or the events of 30k, Chaos troops were routed from Terra. They retreated into a place called the Eye of Terror, a giant rip in space that goes directly to the Warp. In the path of this great eye stood a bastion of humanity that would hold strong against any major chaos incursion. This was a planet called Cadia. For thousands of years and 13 Black Crusades, Cadia stood strong against the armies of Abaddon's chaos hordes. Abaddon being the new Horus, I guess he might literally be a clone. Anyways, on the 13th Crusade, Abaddon crashed a planet-sized spaceship into Cadia that cracked the planet open and completely destroyed it. In this moment, the Eye of Terror ripped apart a giant swath of the galaxy, cutting the Imperium of Man in two.
There's so much stuff that happens in 40k that I'm glossing over. I mean, Cadia, Ophelia 7, and Baal are all planets that have their own stories, their own worlds around them that have stuff going on. There's so much detail and lore. You could learn about any aspect of it. So leave a comment down below for what you like, what you found most interesting, and leave a comment down below if I got anything wrong. What did I misrepresent that you think could be done better? Let me know. Thanks. This has been Taylor Tactics, signing out.